I'm Amanda Knox, and you're listening to Hard Knocks. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ask Amanda Anything, where you can send your questions in, whatever they may be, and I will just answer them. They will come to me through Chris, but primarily through my Substack or through my website. And as a reminder, subscribers to said Substack do get priority in their questions. Do you want to add anything, Christopher?
Yes, of course. Well, I will be prodding and playfully poking Amanda in response to these questions to try and draw out her best answers. So I think we're ready. Last time,
Let's do it.
I tried to give you a lightning round bonus question, and you said it was too big of a question for lightning round.
I don't believe in lightning. Lightning round questions are like, what's your favorite color? Not like, what was your high school experience?
Okay, well, the question is, this is what we're going to start with. Do you look back fondly on your Jesuit education?
So it's that is a complicated question. I will say that at the time that, so, you're asking if I'm looking back. At the time, coming from having zero experience with organized religion, I was not raised in organized religion. Coming into contact with organized religion inside an academic context was jarring for me. It was also alienating for me because I felt like much of the rest of the student body had come from, Catholic upbringings and Catholic schools. And so it was all par for the course. Whereas I felt like I was in a cult. And I was just like, why is there a cult at my school? And why am I being asked to delve into like cult rituals when I don't believe in them? That felt really uncomfortable to me. And I didn't understand. I guess I was frustrated by the idea that, like, to go to a private school and to get a good, like an extra good education, I also had to be in a cult. And I had the sort of teenage growing pains also of sort of having an ideology sort of instilled on me from an authority. I instinctively pushed back on that.
I want to pause a minute here on something, just the private school nature of this too, because you were raised, with an public elementary school teacher mom. And, correct me if I'm wrong here, but she was able to get you a scholarship to go to Seattle Prep. And you went there because it was the only place that offered Japanese. Is that right?
Japanese, yeah. Yeah, that was why I chose Seattle Prep. Wasn't because of it was certainly not its Catholicness or its Jesuitness that attracted me. It was the fact that you could study Japanese. And I had gone to a private school.
Yes, I guess your middle school was a...
Yeah, my middle school was a private school, and I actually had a very good positive experience in my middle school because it was a private independent school. And so in my mind, I attributed private school to, better experiences that I wouldn't otherwise have. I was going camping twice a year with my classmates. I was doing trail work. I was doing skiing. I was doing all of these sort of extracurricular activities.
It was an outdoor, non-standard school, though, right? One thing I'm trying to get at here is, do you think that there are other kids in this Jesuit high school who are coming from a pipeline of schools like that in a way that you weren't? And so it's not just the Catholicness of it, but also the preppy private school side of things. Was there a sense in which you felt like a fish out of water in that world?
Yes, culturally, it was a culture shock for me. There were kids who were significantly more of a different economic bracket than I was. They also lived in a different part of the city than I did. A lot of Bellevue kids, as opposed to which, if for those who are not familiar with the region, there's a lot of wealth is in the Bellevue area, whereas I was in shitty little West Seattle White Center, low income sort of area. Anyway, so the whole point being that, and we don't need to get into these specific details, I think the more important factor is I experienced a culture shock. Looking back on that, do I attribute some goodness to that culture shock? Or is there some sort of inherent value in the Jesuit system? Like, I can't really compare a Jesuit experience to a different Catholic school experience because I don't know the difference. I've only experienced the Jesuit form. And I do appreciate that the Jesuits are deeply, of all the various Catholic institutions, my understanding is that they tend to be more philosophical, more interested in the pursuit of knowledge for the sake of knowledge. And so I appreciated that aspect of it. Would I have thrived in a less ideologically specific space? Yes. I think that I was built for the independent private school as opposed to the religiously, backed up private school. That's kind of my jam.
Would you send our kids to a private high school like that?
Well, we're in the situation where I don't even want to send kids to cool schools. So, what I want to say, though, and again, we're veering off course of what I want to get into, which is the fact that, one thing I absolutely have to give my high school credit for is, first of all, even while I was going through it, my teachers were incredibly supportive. I never felt like my teachers were trying to brainwash me necessarily. It's just they were operating within a context, and I felt very supported, even in my rebelliousness. So I got to give my credit to my actual teachers for that. And then on the other side of it, one thing I want to point out is that the very first letters that I received in prison were from my high school, right? There was something in the very early weeks and even early months of me being in prison, my family and friends and I were all convinced that I was going to be getting out. We were all just let's just get her out. And so the focus wasn't writing me letters, it was getting Amanda out. And so there was a period there in the very beginning where I was just isolated. I just didn't have, the only access that I had to the outside world was the very minimal, contact with my family members and lawyers that I had in prison through visitation. And then suddenly I started receiving letters. And my first letters were from my high school, from my teachers in high school, who all just, I think because of their Jesuit background, understood that a community needs to come together when one member of their community is experiencing a crisis. There's no sort of confusion about that. There's this built-in system of, here's one of our own who is in a crisis, and we are going to come together to support her, which was amazing. These were people who knew me from being, from my teenage years, and they knew that I had nothing to do with this murder, and they immediately reached out to support, and they immediately had my back. And I have to,
just because they knew your character,
attribute. Sorry?
Just because they knew your character?
Yes, because they knew my character, but also because they were Jesuit. There was a Jesuit, the Jesuit Foundation was one in which there was a sort of built-in process to be supportive and to come to the support of someone who's in a crisis. But that doesn't tell them that you're innocent. No,
how do they know you're innocent?
Well, they knew I was innocent because of my character, but the fact that they reached out, right? It wasn't my college who was reaching out that I was actually in school with. Like, I went to, a public college that was not ideologically Jesuit, and lo and behold, I kind of got left high and dry. And like, there wasn't a lot of support that I received from my college. It was like individual teachers from my college who made an effort, but like from the institution itself, I didn't really receive that kind of support. Whereas like out of the blue, it felt like my high school, which was a Jesuit high school, came to my like emotional and spiritual aid in ways that my college didn't. And so I attribute that to the Jesuit tradition, and I appreciate it. So this is why it was not a easy answer to this question.
Yeah, I got you. All right, moving on. Chelsea asks, I'm going to ask Amanda anything. What's a good way to deal with workplace stress that isn't drinking? I recently got promoted to management, and mentally it's kicking my butt. I know you've dealt with a ton of stress. I would love your feedback.
Yeah. The 5 o'clock itch is a real one. And I appreciate you attempting to deal with that in any way that isn't poisoning your body. Because I think the temptation is to take that easy route. And it's one that I've certainly had to deal with as well. Alcoholism runs in my family, and it's something that I'm concerned about because sometimes it is just nice to have a gin and tonic at the end of a long and stressful day when you've been managing people and who don't want to be managed. So I appreciate your struggle. I'm going to once again be really annoying and talk about meditation. I feel like people don't want me to talk about meditation, and this is actually me also doing full disclosure, a really fun, cool new thing that has now occurred is that the Waking Up app, for which I am a contributor, has now reached out to me and offered me the opportunity to create a kind of playlist of my top favorite things from the Waking Up app that I like to listen to and that have helped me sort of navigate managing stress and grief. And so it's going to be, you can reach out to that at wakingup.com/Amanda Knox. You can see my playlist of my favorite Waking Up lectures and series. And
I believe those are all free to listen to, right?
They're all free to listen to. And I believe there's also going to be the opportunity for anyone who goes to that link to get 30 days free on the app. And so what I would recommend is really just trying meditation. So people hate it when I say just meditate, but it really is like of all the things. So there's 2 things that I do to manage my stress. One is exercise. The other is meditate. I think both of them are equally important because both of them are exercises it's like that mind-body balance. So your body is getting that exercise, is using energy in a way that is not the stressful, like the stress of the work is putting all of this psychological pressure on you, and you need an outlet to release it. And physical exercise is one incredible way to release that, how that psychological energy just gets pounded into your body. Mm-hmm. And then the other way to then emerge sort of clear-eyed and more effectively navigate the stresses and the managing of all the different parts is that slowing down, allowing yourselves 10 minutes a day of just quiet so that it can just settle and restart your mind. In the way that you might say your computer is overloading, you're just going to unplug it and replug it back in. That's what meditation does for your brain. It's just restarting it. And I think if you are looking for some kind of guidance in that, which I recommend, especially if you're early on, using Sam Harris's introductory course is a really, really great way to ease into meditation. Again, it's 10 minutes. It's really effective. And it's just kickstarting your brain again. So physical exercise, if you can find the time for it, and 10 minutes a day to meditate, which you should absolutely find the time for.
I think I would also add here that I've heard you recommend this to plenty of people, and often a response I hear is people saying, I just can't do that. I can't slow my brain down. It's a million miles an hour. And I think the response to that is, well, you don't have to. You don't have to think, you don't have to imagine that when you sit there, you're going to be totally vacant in your mind. That's not the goal, right?
I mean, ultimately it's the goal, but like the actual thing that is happening is merely that you are sitting down and not attempting to control or manage your mind. You're just witnessing it. And whatever comes to your mind is what's going to come to your mind. And the first step in meditation is just noticing it. And again, like if you do the introductory course on the Waking Up app, it will guide you through that. Like you do not have to be a guru to meditate. I am not a guru. I am just someone who appreciates the 10 minutes a day of giving yourself a moment to sit back and bear witness and then proceed with a more effective
just like practice being aware of what your mind is doing. I think just that meta level of like, whoa, my mind's really racing. Like you and I have both had meditation sessions where it's like, you sit there even for an hour and you're just like, my brain would not calm down today. It was just running off everywhere.
That monkey mind.
I'd get lost in trains of thought, but like noticing that tendency immediately takes some of the grip that it has on you to just tug you into various different modes. It loosens it in a I think healing way. So I second your meditation recommendation. That's wakingup.com/Amanda Knox for your playlist.
Yep, that's for my playlist, as well as for an opportunity to do 30 days free on the Waking Up app.
Cool. Okay, next we have a letter from Jody. Dear Amanda, sorry, this is going to be a heavy one, forewarning. Dear Amanda, my son was killed by a drunk driver 3 years ago. I've been through hell, a different hell than you, and I really want to speak to the driver of the car that killed my son. He was over the limit with alcohol. He went through a stop sign onto a main road, and my beautiful son was riding his motorcycle, minding his own business, and the next moment he was dead. I listened to you on Joe Rogan, and I heard your sincere, radical forgiveness, and also the anger that you still have. Amanda, it's like that. I relate to that. I want to speak to the guy. We went through the court system, and the man was sentenced for negligent homicide, speeding under the influence of alcohol, and he got 3 years in prison suspended, and they take away his license for 1 year. I know it's unjust, but that's not the point. The point is, I don't want to walk away from this situation being diminished. The point is, I want to speak to the guy. All my friends and even my legal advisors say don't talk to him. The criminal case finished about 2 months ago. The civil case where they awarded the family some money. The civil case, the insurance company is appealing. Thank God the criminal case is not being appealed. Mm-hmm. That's the situation.
Yeah. And there's no question. It's just, this is the situation. Yeah. Yeah.
But like he wants to talk to this guy. I mean, I think the question that I would draw from that is, how do you feel about that?
Yeah. So I 100% empathize with your feeling. And I love that you have identified that there are competing feelings inside of you. You don't just have one feeling. One feeling is that you're so angry at this person. Another feeling is that you don't want to be diminished by your anger. Another feeling is that you want to have radical empathy for everyone involved. And I think that's really, I think that's very generous, and also I think important for just understanding how things really happen. Like, how could this happen? Understanding this man's context and, what was going on in his life and in his brain in that moment when he made those fatal decisions to drive, when he was under the influence, all of that. Obviously, I don't think that he probably thought he was going to be in danger of killing someone when he got into his car, but he also wasn't thinking. And I think that that's really, I think it's powerful, the idea that you want to talk to this person. And I think that a powerful conversation could come from it, particularly since the legal case seems to be over. The one thing I will caution, though, is that the idea that you need to speak to this person in order to be okay. this was something that was actually really important for me to figure out when I felt this impulse to want to talk to my prosecutor. And some of the best advice that I got leading up to that was not mistaking this person as being the gatekeeper to my own well-being, right? Like, my prosecutor or the man who killed your son, they are not the ones who hold the key to you being okay. You are. You don't need to speak to this person to be okay. You can find ways to express your grief and your anger and your compassion without speaking to this person necessarily. That said, if there is something you feel like you have to offer this human being, as opposed to needing to get something from him, then I think that there is value in imagining what that thing might be and how you might convey what that is to this person. Because again, the danger is feeling like you need to get something out of the experience as opposed to give something. If you have something to give, then you cannot fail. If you need to get something, then you will fail. So what I would
I think
suggest,
on that note about what you would give, it's easy to imagine that people who commit tremendous harm like this are remorseless. Like, they don't always show it. In a case like this, where it's negligent homicide and this guy made a really irresponsible, stupid choice to drive under the influence, like, unless he's a psychopath, which I don't, no information here to suggest that, I would imagine that it's got to be an incredibly awful feeling to know that your own stupidity took someone's life like that.
I mean, I don't want to project anything on the person because we don't know anything about this person. I think that it's not, I mean, again, that's kind of irrelevant, I think, for what this person is experiencing. It may be that, Jody wants to have a conversation to understand where this person who negligently murdered his son, how he is coping with that reality, what he was thinking in the moment and what he's thinking now. That may be of interest. I think the thing that I want to encourage Jody to do is meditate on the idea that what matters now is him, Jody doing what he needs to do to honor his son and to honor himself and his own grief, and to not imagine that this person, again, is the one who has the ability to offer you closure. And instead imagine what it is potentially that you have to offer to him. That's what I would suggest. And I wish him all the best on that journey, because that's hard. And I don't think that the anger will ever really go away, because that just shouldn't have happened. It's a thing that shouldn't have happened. And it cost you everything. And it was it would have been so easy for that not to have happened. And yet here you are. And I think, going through the process of accepting that some things that easily couldn't have happened did happen, and there's nothing you can do about that, is the hardest thing that you will have to eventually accept. And I know from my own experience that I have days where I'm better at accepting that than others, and that's okay. You can still be angry. And I think that that's not the only feeling that you're going to feel.
Great. Well, I think I want to switch tones here and move to something lighter to close this out. We have a couple different questions that centered around a similar theme. So there's two here. One is from Anonymous. I just want to know what little things you found that helped you find your way today with humor and candor that seems to me to be fairly darn healthy and thriving. And another person, Abby, asks, I was wondering if you'd be willing to speak about how you maintained hope during your time in Italy when everything must have felt so uncertain and painful. I know you're also using humor now, and I'd love to hear how that's helped you heal. But more than anything, I'm curious what lessons we might draw from your experience, what you learned about holding on to hope when the world around you feels hopeless. So kind of this conjunction of how do you hold on to hope, and like what role does humor play in that for you? And maybe you can talk a little bit about your recent exploits in humor and maybe the trajectory and deepening of your own investment in humor as a method for dealing with all this.
Yeah, all great questions. I think that, where to start? So one thing to make clear is that what do I mean by hold on to hope? Because especially while I was still in prison and still, facing a really long sentence, there absolutely were times where my mental space was not primarily focused on hoping that that would resolve itself in the right way, right? Like I've written before about how when I received my guilty verdict and I experienced an existential crisis where I realized that I may not be vindicated and freed. And if so, how could I live a life worth living? And I think the hope that I held on to was less about a specific judicial outcome and more about having a life that was worth living and having a life where I could feel purposeful and meaningful, regardless of the limitations that were put on me. So first of all, I think that maintaining a sense of hopefulness requires a kind of perspective shift like that, where you do not stack all of your chips, like all of your emotional and psychological chips, on a specific outcome. And instead, you allow yourself the flexibility and nimbleness to psychologically and emotionally adapt to different sets of circumstances, to different outcomes, and try to imagine the hopeful scenario in a number of different potential outcomes. So that's one strategy. The other strategy was, I think, so, and this, I'm going to sort of get to how all of this relates, but like one thing that you realize in meditation, again, to bring it back to meditation, sorry, again, but one of the things that you realize when you just sit in the moment is that in that moment that you are sitting, you are okay. There are no problems you have to solve. There is no to-do list you have to do. You are just there, sitting, and you are okay. When you get up from sitting, you'll have problems to solve and a to-do list to do. None of that goes away, but in the moment of sitting, you are okay. And I think that that's a really profound insight, that if you just stop, you are okay. And it's sort like when you really sit with that realization, you also realize that even with the problems you have to solve and the to-do lists that you have to do and the things that you could lose, behind all of that, you're still okay. Because that's the sort of baseline truth. And really knowing that deep down allows you the ability to, again, not depend upon certain outcomes. It doesn't matter ultimately if you solve this problem versus another. It doesn't matter ultimately if you do the to-do list. Like, you're gonna do the best you can. You're gonna do what, you're gonna do the best you can. And that's enough. And that's okay.
I want to pull that apart a little bit, because I've heard you talk this way before, and it's always, I find it a little bit opaque to me.
Frustrating for you as a person who's a slave to a to-do list?
Well, I am. That's true. But I think I'm going to rephrase this a little bit and tell me if it resonates with you. That when you say, the baseline underneath it all, you're okay. Another way to talk about this is that, the past and future only exist in your mind in the present moment. The present moment is the only thing that's actually real. And your to-do list is, the problems you have to solve, right? Those are things that exist in your hypothetical future, in your mind. And if you're feeling anxiety about what's to come or what you haven't solved, that's anxiety that's rooted in the imagining of your future in the present moment. And likewise, if you're feeling trailed or haunted by grief or loss or something in your past that has limited or shaped your opportunities in some way, again, that's a thing in the past that you are conjuring mentally that is affecting your experience of the present moment. And if you're able to anchor yourself in the present and let go of those concerns about tomorrow and those concerns about yesterday, then you'll realize that in that present moment, there is no anxiety. There is no feeling haunted. There's only just feeling okay. Those other things get layered on top of it. Yeah.
You're reflecting back only part of what I'm saying. All of that, about what you said, is true. And also, all of the stuff, all of the problems that we need to solve and all of the to-do lists that we have to do, it's okay if they don't get solved and they don't get done. Like, it's also okay. Like, I think that's another layer to it, is that everything as it is right now is enough and could use some improvement. Like, that's the paradox of Zen, which I love, is that, yes, we are all striving to solve the problems and get the things done, and all of that is true. And at the same time, already everything as it is enough. Like, this is it. This is it. This is everything. And also, that's the thing that I'm trying to point to, that paradox of, we have all these things.
Accept the world as it is and strive to change it.
Yeah, and accept you as you are. Like, accept that. Really accept, like, right now, as I am, with all of my things undone and with all of my problems that remain unsolved, I'm okay. Like, I'm good.
Right. So that's all very insightful, but so far it's a very unfunny answer.
Oh, well, and now you're talking about humor.
How does humor play into that?
So humor plays into that because humor is an incredible release valve and perspective shifter. So the anxiety of and the grief of problems unsolved and things undone can be overwhelming and to the point of debilitating. And one of the best ways I have found to take the heaviness of things and just make light of them. Just take a heavy thing and twist it in your mind to find the absurdity in it, the lightness in it. And to give an example, and this is just something that comes really naturally to me. I think that I'm like, God, some of the more cringy things from my like journals back when they were first sequestered by the police and then released to the media were some of these ideas that of me just like trying to take a really heavy thing and turn it into a light thing in my mind because it was so overwhelming. Like, I remember there was something I wrote in my journal, like while I was still sitting in the police station, where I was like, man, I wish I could say I could kill for a slice of pizza, but obviously that's a horrible thing to think right now. Like that's my brain trying to like make light of like of a really overwhelming situation by finding like, you know, the dark sense of humor. Like, oh, we have these turns of phrase. Basically what that joke was in my brain was, oh my God, the number of ways that we in our life use terminology that is so laden with like tragedy and grief and horror, and just sort of just flippantly say that as if it's meaningless. And now like my relationship with those kinds of languages is irreparably altered. Like now that I know someone who has been murdered, I can't just be like, you know, flippantly, you know, like, or even something like, and again, like another thing that like this is like getting into the psychology of things. Like I never write down, oh, let me take a stab at that. Like I never say that anymore because I am like so aware like of just how laden that is. And so now I say whenever I write something, oh, let me take a swing at that. And that's what so like just like that hyper sort of sensitivity to language and how absurd that is something that is worth like it's acknowledging the heaviness of the thing as well as the absurdness of the thing, and it lightens it, and there's a pressure release in just like acknowledging that fact. And I think that's what some of the best, you know, comedians do is they find opportunities for something to feel just like deeply dense with psychic energy, and then they flip it and release it. So, you know, I remember watching I watch a lot of, you know, comedians on Instagram, and there's this bit from this comedian. God, I wish I could remember his name so I could do him justice. Maybe we can put his name in the show credits. But like he talked about how he loves to go on walks with his son because beautiful women, he has got a young son, because beautiful women will smile at his son and then they'll smile at him because he has a beautiful son. And in part, he's thinking, oh, yes, look what me and my beautiful wife have created, this beautiful little boy. But also, I would leave it all in a moment, beautiful woman. Just say the word, you know. There's this like, and then he brings it up a notch where he says, and then I ran this joke by my wife to see what she thought, and she was like, oh yeah, I feel that all the time. And he was like, I was just joking about it, you know. So like that's like the sort of like horror embedded in like the drama, and then you just flip it and release it. And so I love. Like, I naturally am inclined towards finding the levity and the heaviness because that's how I can carry it. And then I've just been doing that more and more in my own life because, as we know, tragedy plus time equals comedy, and I'm really leaning into that. But you know what? Like, even tragedy plus not that much time can be comedy for you as you were sort of like grappling with something in the moment. Just be aware that somebody might take your joking attitude and potentially accuse you of murder because of it. So, you know,
yeah, that
careful.
Pizza line was cited as evidence of you being a psychopath, if I'm not mistaken.
Right? And it's like, it's evidence of me having a dark sense of humor, and I'm trying to figure out how to navigate this difficult situation by having
not even a dark sense of humor
privately to myself.
Yeah, but I think also that we all do that. Like, you look at these phrases that are embedded in your language and they start to mean something different to you when you experience a tragedy like that. And it's weird to reflect on that. When I think you were in your inarticulate 20-year-old way reflecting on the strangeness of that. I think another thing about that I want to like drill into a little here is the absurdity side of it, because comedy is often anchored in absurdity, but so is tragedy. Like, I feel like if you draw a circle with absurdity, you know, like there's normalcy on one side of the circle, you go all the way around to the other side, and comedy and tragedy are both there in the same spot. They're both deeply animated by absurdity and by this sense that like what you expect to happen is not what's going to happen, right? Like that's the essence of a joke, and it's the essence of a shocking, life-altering surprise. And I think that explains perhaps why these two things get merged in this way. And I'm wondering if you can reflect a little bit more on, the Kafkaesque side of this, the absurdity side of your own particular tragedy, but of tragedies in general, and how it seems to make the world not make sense, and what role comedy plays in relation to that.
I think you've just done the reflecting there, which is that I think it comes down to that idea that you think the world is going in a certain way, and then suddenly misdirection. Like suddenly you are 180 degrees away from where you expect it to be. And that heightened emotion is one that can make you both sort of giddy as well as horror struck. Another great example, and again, like I feel like my body does this naturally, and I think a lot of people's bodies do this naturally, but I remember once when I was a teenager, I was in the front passenger seat of a car that was turning left at an intersection, and it was kind of dark out, and an oncoming car did not have their headlights on. So the driver of my car did not see an oncoming car and drove into it, and we got T-boned on my side. Like I for a second there, I looked out the window and there was an oncoming car smashing into me. And the only thing between me and that car was my car door. And I remember in that moment, everything slowing down, and we start spinning because we're hit and we're spinning. And I was laughing. I was laughing because of that. Like I had horror, and I was horrified. Oh my God, I'm going to die. And it sort of dead possumed me for a second. And then this second after we were hit and we were spinning and I wasn't dead, I was feeling those heightened levels of elation. I'm not dead. I'm not dead. Just laughing. And to the point that the person who was driving looked over at me and was like, "What is wrong with you?" When we finally stopped, he was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "But are you okay? Why are you laughing?" There was, and so again, I think that there's something really true about how we physically respond to some life or circumstances or ideas striking us in a way that we did not expect, and then feeling like there is a heightened elation on the other side of that. And I think that is true also of finding the absurdity in situations and making jokes about them. It's tapping into that.
Yeah, I might also add that pattern of, life is going in one direction, then all of a sudden it takes this sharp left turn, misdirection. You are usually, almost always, not in control of those misdirections when a tragedy strikes you. And there's something affirming that gives you agency when you operate in a comedic context and you become the author of the misdirection.
Right. You're guiding another person on that journey of feeling misdirected, and you're playing God to that person's moment of elation. Yeah, that's true. That is true. There is something interesting. I like that idea of you are reclaiming a sense of control over that feeling by being the one who orchestrates, because really, comedy above all is a performance about guiding your audience on an emotional journey, and very meticulously guiding them very quickly even through these scenarios that lead them to experience that misdirection and the elation that arises from it. Yeah.
Totally.
Okay.
Well, this has been fun. Thank you, everyone, for connecting with us here. If you want to reach out, you can submit your questions and comments through Substack. That's amandaknox.substack.com. You can also go through Amanda's website, amandaknox.com. And of course, we will prioritize questions from subscribers. And we'll be back next week with another one of these. It's going to be a busy month for us. We'll be on the road traveling to promote the upcoming Hulu show, The Twisted Tale of Amanda Knox. So stay tuned for more of that. If you have questions related to the show, the trailer is just out now. We'd love to hear your questions. And we presume there will be many more once you're able to see some episodes, which we're excited for you. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.